And we're back. What's up going on, everybody? This is the next part in our three-part series. Actually, kicking off our first part here, we are going to dive into in how to master jigging on the St. Clair River, and you can actually apply this to the Detroit River as well. And I'm sure a lot of different rivers as well, but as far as the weight that we're going to be talking about and style of bait we're going to be talking about, predominantly St. Clair River, Detroit River, this will catch you fish no matter what. So let's dive into it. There's really two, honestly, in my opinion, two different styles of baits that work phenomenally well in these two different systems. Number one is just your standard finesse fish. I like the 3-inch or 4-inch. Bunch of different colors that we'll kind of talk about here in a little bit, but that is number one. Number two is just going to be your worm style. This is a finesse Mr. Ribster. Also, if you are a Detroit River fisherman, you'll probably heard of the Wyandotte worm as well. It's a smaller, thicker worm, about that round. Also made by Bonnie Baits, and John Bonnie makes a great one as well. So let's dive into it. Kind of what we're going to be going over here is two things: is size of weight, colors, as well as what you're going to do, and the best way to kind of navigate the waters here. I think later on, a couple months down the road, especially when it gets closer to next spring, we'll talk about some of the hot spots on the Detroit River as well as the St. Clair River as well. But for now, we're just really going to be sticking on presentation and how to actually jig to increase your hookup percentage. So early in the springtime, we're talking first, second week of April. The Detroit River starts to turn on. Again, Detroit River is what connects Lake St. Clair to Lake Erie. A bunch of different spots on that river that will produce, but the best way to do it is going to be get your 3/4 ounce jig head or 1 ounce jig head. Now, if you're a beginner, you're going to want to stick with the 1 ounce until you master feeling the bottom. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that as well, what that looks like and what that feels like as well. A few different styles of jig heads here that I like is going to be, this is made by Domka. This is it's kind of a mixture between a river jig and as well as a round ball jig. This cuts to the river pretty well as you can see. It's kind of beat up here right on the nose. What this thing will do is crash down to the bottom and then ease down. I like that style. It's one of my favorites. I've caught a lot of fish on that. You also have your normal round ball jig. Again, 3/4, 1 ounce is going to crush it for you. I like the longer shank. The longer shank seems to get into the walleye's mouth a little bit easier. Obviously walleye are they have a pretty coarse mouth. It's tough to rip through there. So I like the longer shank hook, but some people do like the smaller shank. This is made by Northland. This is the Northland Fireball jig. What's nice about this is early in the season, I'll talk about this here in a second, but you can attach a trailer hook to it really easily. So why would I use a trailer hook? At the beginning of the year, the fish are still very lethargic. The water's still very cold, so what they're normally going to do is just nip at the back of this jig. And if you have a trailer hook dangling there, it's going to be a lot easier to hook up if you actually have the trailer hook on the end of your hook. I don't use trailer hooks that much. If you're less experienced, I would say definitely do it. But I'm not a big fan of them. Reasons why is you're going to hook up on a lot more zebra mussels, and that's going to throw off the presentation of your bait, as well as you're just going to hook into a lot more snags. So if you can avoid it, I say definitely do it. But in that first week, second week in April, I'm usually going to have a stinger on there just to make sure that I hook up with them fish. Different style of baits we kind of talked about. Some of my all-time favorites is Blue Ice by Finesse. Killer. Blue on top, clear silver flake on the bottom. Absolutely murders the fish. Um, all black. All black is an absolute dynamite color as well. I would say between the two of those are usually my 1-2 punch. I'm going to try them both out to start the day. If I'm not producing on that, I might change it up, but usually you can't go wrong with those two. Now, if it's middle of the day, high sunshine, I like to use a little bit of brighter color. This is Mr. Ribster, also made by Finesse. If you can see, there's a trend with Finesse products. They work phenomenally well. Yeah, this is my third go-to. I've caught a lot of walleye with that. So, colors of baits. Colors of jigs. My main all-time go-to is the antifreeze. It's a metallic silver base and then painted over with a green. So this thing in the water, especially on a sunny day, is so cool to look at. And obviously, jigs catch the fishermen more than they do the fish, but hey, these seem to outproduce everybody on the boat when I have an antifreeze on there. Sometimes if the water's a little more stained, I will go to like a dark jig, but 9 times out of 10 I have some type of antifreeze on there or some type of fire tiger. However, this last year, I've been crushing them on this Glow 1-ounce jig made by VMC. Now, I was kind of startled in the store when I first saw this. I didn't realize that VMC made this big of jig, and I was stoked about it. And when I tried it, it's a little shorter shank, but again, the VMC hooks are just phenomenal. So the hookup percentage was still there, even with the shorter shank, and VMC absolutely just crushes the game. So black, blue ice, any orange, yellows, crush it. Another crusher is the Pimp Daddy, also by Finesse. These seem to produce a little bit more in the St. Clair River than they do the Detroit River, but you'll still definitely crush them in the Detroit River. So how do we do it? Number one key is really just boat control. I've seen a lot of guys go out there, they have the technique down, they know how to jig, but unfortunately, boat control in the river is not easy. You have 2 different factors that you're dealing with. You have a 3 to 5 mile an hour current in the water, as well as a wind that could be going the same direction, but more than likely is going in opposite direction. Best thing to do is take your boat and face the wind. So if the wind is blowing this way, I'm going to be facing the wind this way, and then just cruising down the river with it. And then when those big gusts come on, I can kick up my trolling motor. But I'm usually going to be keeping my trolling motor on a low continuous, so it's always trolling and kind of keeping in line, because the main thing that you want to do is keep that line as vertical as possible. So when your jig is down in and hits the bottom, you can feel it immediately. And that's the biggest thing when we are jigging is every time I'm touching bottom. Doesn't matter how fast the fish like it. They're still very aggressive or they're not aggressive at all. I'm always touching and kicking the bottom. In ice fishing, obviously when we're jigging, we want it a little bit higher off the bottom, kind of more like 6 to 8 inches. But when we're jigging in the Detroit River and the St. Clair River, I'm going and I'm touching bottom every single time. Here's what I'm looking at. When I'm dropping this thing down, I got my finger right on the line at all times. Typically running a braid down to a 6-foot fluorocarbon leader line. Reason for the braid is I can feel basically everything. So as soon as that baby hits the bottom, my line will start to bow or to give, and then I'll know to pop it right back up. Earlier in the year, all I'm doing is literally just that. Just a quick hit the bottom, raise it up. Hit the bottom, raise it up. Now when it starts getting a little bit warmer, say like mid-May, I'm hitting the bottom and I'm drinking it up maybe about a foot. This creates a much more aggressive trigger strike, But earlier in the year, it's really all about that just 6-inch hop, 6-inch hop, 6-inch hop. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to feel the fish hit it on a straight line. Typically what happens is they will be on the bottom looking up, and as this thing comes bouncing along, they will look at it on its way up, and as it falls, they will crush it. You're not normally going to feel that unless they slant it, which, they definitely will sometimes. But when they do hit it, they'll typically hit it when it's going back down. When you're going to feel it is when you go down and pop it back up. 9 times out of 10, when you're fishing for these guys, that's where you're going to catch them. So when you're dropping it down, you pop it up, you're going to feel the weight there. That's when you're going to want to set the hook. So the biggest thing, really, keeping that line as vertical as possible all the way up to your pole. Hitting the bottom every single time. Quick pops. That's going to increase your hookup percentage every single time. I hope this gave you a little bit of value and a little bit of knowledge for the Detroit River. Again, this works on Detroit River, St. Clair River, just the same. Detroit River will produce a little bit earlier than St. Clair, but St. Clair turns on about mid-May all the way till about mid-June. You can still catch them all the time. So I hope this helps. Get out there. If you're going to do this, get out there early. Before sunrise, get some lines in the water. Sunrise to about midday is when this really picks up. From about 1 o'clock to 4 p.m. it dies off again, and then about 4:30 to sunset is when it kicks back on. But the best bite I've found on the Detroit River and St. Clair River when I'm jigging is always going to be that sun up to about 11 a.m. is really when this really takes off. So, again, hope that provided you some value. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit. And next thing I want to do is continue on to the series. We're going to talk about spinner fishing on this next episode of Itch to Fish tutorials here. And again, if you can do me one favor, like this and subscribe. That's going to help me out and keep pushing me to provide all this value for you guys. So I love you all. Tight lines. Let's go.